All right. Welcome to the Red Wheelbarrow Poetry Collective for this special reading by Giles Griffin. I love that you describe yourself as an unsuspecting poet in your bio. Giles is part of the Life Writing Collective and works there with course facilitation and marketing. So many of you may know him from that group. And he writes about food, loss, recovery, identity, and nature, among other things. And this is going to be a special treat for us all. If you want to say anything else about who you are before you dive in, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Melissa. Thanks for that intro. And yeah, thank you to all of you, all of the collective, for this my inaugural poetry reading in public. So I'm slightly nervous, but I have done a number of short appearances at McGregor and also at the Commons with your good selves. Usually, I think before with Lisa Julie originally, and then under the auspices of the LRC. But this is the first time I've done a collection, and so yes, as Melissa says, there are kind of a number of themes. I've gathered them together under those themes, and I've put them in an order which I hope makes some sense. You know, some of them I think I do have to say are quite heavy in content. I think the term nowadays is not trigger warning, but content alert. You know, that there are issues of loss, there are issues of sudden death and death by suicide that will come up. And because I identify as queer, there will be a couple of poems about that as well. I hope that doesn't trigger people, but just so you know. I don't think you need warnings about food and relationship necessarily. And then the other theme that we will look at is nature. So let me dive in. I am going to read off the screen, so hopefully my I won't be looking too glazed when I do it. So I'm going to start with the queer theme, because I think that in many ways, obviously, it is a core part of my identity. And this first poem is indeed a question, a call about where that identity comes from, and it's called Born That Way. Blank page, unknown child enwombed before arrival. Who knows where destiny lies? Nature, nurture, born gay or made by mothers? Jury's still out. Science says biology has a part to play. Science says environment also matters. Gay gene not pinned down as yet. There's no hard proof. Pity, or would genetics spell a death knell? Tricky. Nature does her thing, no one's to blame. Nurture, someone made me so, it's not my fault. Nature is my preference, makes sense to me. Science remains quite firmly sat on that fence. Mothers, single or smothering, are off the hook. Rather, call me by my name, let the cards fall. Though that, not so simple now as it once was. Choices, LGBTI, QA++, edges blurring more complex identities. Mostly, we make our own way, and painfully. Sometimes the stakes are too high, even fatal. Gays know, lesbians more so, freedom's bride price. No choice, Hobson's if it is, but born that way. Closet or vibrant rainbow, what's it to be? Slowly, closets are creaking open all over. Hiding not the only way to live a life. Churches cause more pain than good in this regard. Toxic masculinity helps not one jot. Closets remain far safer for many folk. For me, late development arrested somewhat. Letter written from London to Midlands home, bombshell confirming worst fears and social death. Mother famously saying, some things aren't said. Aren't said? As though they are not, if not uttered. Logic fueled by bigotry, quite laughable. For me, then independent, deed safe enough. Not so for others elsewhere, few protections, and still the big frustration. Don't talk of it. Just once, she talked of partners, asked how you were. Late on, a few months before she did the deed, wanted in awful hindsight to soothe her son, to check that I was cared for when she was gone. False hope that devastation could be sidestepped. Partners are not made for this, at least not mine. Mostly, as with much of life, grief is lonely, and time, the cliched healer, may help, may not. Losses are for me the lack of extra time to talk in the living years of things unsaid, no chance to talk through that thing we started with. Your fault? Or was I born that way? Now, I'll never know. So that's the kind of first one, and it introduces a number of other themes around my mother and around coming out and so on, and her death, which will become a little clearer as we go further. And then this next one is called For Not Out, open bracket, yet, close brackets. And just a little note, there's a term Coleman balls, which is a term coined by Private Eye magazine in the UK to describe verbal blunders made by sports commentators. There was a well-known commentator called Richard Coleman. And Coleman balls is the kind of complete mess of language that sports commentators can sometimes create. So just to make that clear. When I am 4, I pull the telly over and a black and white monster comes crashing to the floor. 1966, the decade in full swing, Mary Quant the very thing, along with pickup sticks. Flashes of that day come instamatic back, chiefly the resounding thwack of carpet meeting cathode ray. Truly aghast at what I've gone and done, I dread tirade to come, nuclear trumpet blast. I think this was a summer Saturday, grandstands, wild wordplay, making mad Coleman balls. My father's life was cricket, sporting stuff I had already shown so very little interest in. So when that day I grabbed the rediffusion, I made my feelings clear in my own childish way. Already knowing, as children often do, that relationship blues were likely in the offing. Within 2 years, the die was cast and fate made 68 the date of change, divorce, and tears. The next theme is loss, and there are a number of longer pieces here, and one of the things that I've written quite extensively about is HIV. I worked in the field of HIV prevention and in both in the UK and in South Africa. And so I wrote a long piece back in, gosh, yeah, the mid 2015, 16s around my experience of this, because I came out as HIV and AIDS, became, well, it was still called gay-related, I think it was called GRID then, so it was gay-related specifically, but of course it became much more than that. And the whole poem is about my journey with HIV. But this is just the beginning, and it's actually in the Life Writing Collective's anthology, This Is How It Is, and it's called Gone Viral. This is 2017. And it's the introduction to the longer piece. I have a raging rash across my back, telegraphing months of pressure that reached a flamingo pink climax the day before the spots constellated their message across my unsuspecting spine. Exhaustion, I expected, anticlimax too, but shingles or its other itch-fest siblings, I did not. I shed my shirt and stand for inspection. She puts on gloves and peers and prods. There is a pause, a hesitation. She says she is not sure if it is shingles. It could be in its early stages. Then she hints and hedges, offers salves to help. Another pause. She knows this clinic well. Gay men have come and gone here. In these rooms, the virus has held thrall, at first winning hands down against all comers, felling young and old, coldly scything away at lives just starting, swiftly ending them with a death knell tolled so very many times between these four Woodstock walls, often starting with a dose of flu or angry rash. Today, of course, the story is a different one. There is treatment, a halt and respite. Life can go on. Damocles is thwarted by drugs and healthy living. Long-term survival is now the norm. She breaks into my reverie and asks, "When did you last have an HIV test?" I start and stumble over words and thoughts. I have not been asked this question with concern for many years. Life insurance, health tests, anonymous requests for blood and sputum. But this is something else. This is personal. It could not be. I have been tested. Year on year, doctors have pricked my fingers without a word of counseling. I have been blasé, assured by rock-fast beliefs and training in HIV prevention. Safer sex, for goodness sake, it was my job. But that was in another time, another place. I'm suddenly unsure. I was tested last December. I have another test booked this coming week. I'm pretty sure my status hasn't changed. For years now, it has been negative. And for the first time, I noticed the paradoxical release of it. Negative as the positive result. Positive, the solemn opposite. Positive was decay and death. Positive was not positive at all. However much the ACT UP lobby tried to persuade us otherwise, and magazines like Pause stood up and looked the virus clearly in the eye. It still won the battle so decisively that those of us outside it could only watch and stare as it skittled down our friends and lovers, taking, damn the cliche, no prisoners at all. Suddenly, I am doubtful. My training swirled in fearful fogs of loss and time. Have things changed? Are there new modes of transmission I have somehow missed? Are toilet seats to be avoided at all costs? Must we hover to avoid contamination? Should I not swim in the same pool as you? Can I share that towel or sip your coffee cup? She looks at me, unsure of who I am, my past, my losses, my viral history. She only sees un homme d'un certain âge, gay and grey, not those I've loved and lost, does not know her doctor partner worked with me in the fight against this virus, bargaining with viral blood and semen, the shit and vomit that marked the end of those who did not have what we have now, reprieve. I blink and stumble back into the room. My pupils flare, I shiver and repeat, I have an HIV test booked next week. Discovery will take my blood again. And so I do. And negative I stay, reminder that I'm here to tell the tale of those who can no longer do so. So that's very much a part of my life, has been in this country, particularly a considerable loss around HIV and AIDS, both friends and lovers. This is a very particular loss, a very particular memory. And I'm not sure if it's a metaphor, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm that good at the traditional image and metaphor, but there is an image, a strong image in this poem, and it's called, in fact, it's got two names. One's called Woodgate Memories. To become clear, I think that was my parents' last home, but it's also called Picture Window. The room is small, a shower to the left, and then a basin opposite the door, a square of carpet, a toilet on the right, a sylvan view through a tiny window. The porcelain is pale pastel puce. The original, I'm pretty sure, my Auntie Nora's 60s choice, Uncle Bob's magnanimous concession. I don't remember the taps or fittings, standard chrome, not Philippe Starck or Hans Grohe, but there were some period patterned tiles, in no way something to write home about. This bathroom without a bath was en suite to the main bedroom up those narrow stairs, a room that also took that country view in and made the house uniquely theirs. The house was built by distant cousin Bob, my granny's cousin, and Nora, his wife, a place for them to end their days in, a celebration of a well-lived life. At its heart was a heated swimming pool, the one I learned to swim in passing well, where my young water's fear was conquered, learning to temper air beneath its swell. Temperature was always madly measured, a battered steel tube on a plastic line, drawn up to show its black and red record of the likely length of swimming time. 80 was nirvana, 78 okay, 74 deemed a little chilly, 70 was quite beyond the pale, seeping blue to all extremities. Surveying all this was that little room, which overlooked the glittering swimming pool, then lovely landscape ponds and garden with its wooded view across the meadow. The memories started 8 or so, 1970, visits to go and swim from Western Village to Milford Common, a road trip of nearly 30 minutes. Sometimes we were offered trolleyed tea and cake, such a treat to shivering prune-skinned children, emerging from the changing shed to shake off the place we never dreamed we'd live in. I'm not quite sure when my mother moved there. My sister and I had long left the nest, and retirement loomed for stepfather. This was to be their final resting place. But so they did, my sister marrying there, a marquee in the field, the usual smutty speeches, my mother's hosting triumph, planned over months, ending for some with naked pool pyramids. Generations moved in. Granny B, bless, her own house burnt down, came and left the gas on, threatening Woodgate with her forgetfulness, but it survived 4 generations. There is a picture. Niece Holly, her mum, my sister Sarah, mum, and her ma too, great-grandchildren added to the soft hum of sacrifices being made by selfless love. Summers of step-grandchildren sparkled like the pool that anchored the epic view, sulky games of croquet, then ailing health, and unbeknownst to us, all draining you. And still, the little room looked down on this, the strutting pheasants in the field beyond, the classic country view, the spaniel playing, the stealthy heron fishing at the pond. For in that room, in April 2012, you took your life, age 78, leaving chaos in your wake as these things do, generating an endless wave of grief and guilt, shadowing the hazy, lazy summer days that should have been our Woodgate story. And so the next piece kind of pulls that out a bit in terms of how we talk about taking our own life, how we talk about suicide. So that does give the game away to some extent in terms of what this is about, but the last taboo often is what suicide is called. The last taboo, the other scar, the act for which there is no other name, a violent word, nothing soft about the act for which there is no other name. Thesaurus says recklessness, perversity, rashness, irresponsibility, madness. All the above, quite so, but actually not quite. There is no other name. A rash, reckless, perverse, irresponsible, mad act may be, but so much more. So you name it, you choose to tell the chosen few the fact for which there is no other name. And then you wait for the silence to shout back at you about that act for which there is no other name. They do not speak. They do not ask how you feel about the act for which there is no other name. They do not have the words, perhaps, but surely they can feel the need for touch to mourn the act for which there is no other name. So is it up to you to keep on naming it, shocking listeners with deaf ears into submission? What signal do they need to know? They are free to ask how you are feeling. What go-ahead will set them free to ask what steps they need to take to hold you? Perhaps it is a club so closed that outsiders do not have the code. Perhaps the key is given only to the branded few. Trespassers keep out. Perhaps the safe that holds the gold of grief and guilt consoled is locked, for some eyes only. And so we turn to experts and ourselves, keeping shame inside, working guilt in silence. This cannot be the healthy way to do this thing, to stare the monster down. It is a lonely path, and all the more because it is not chosen by us, at least. And therein lies another curse and question. The genes may lead not just this one, but others the same way. Are we to watch ourselves and offspring for signs of things to come, triggers and traps? It seems that it may be. The experts tell us so. On top of grief and guilt, the genes play on. A tribute then to those who hear and listen and hold the lives we lead together in some way. A shout out to the therapists, the priests, the doctors, some who hold our hands, but not the friends who did not have the words or deeds for us when we sought them. Better then look to ourselves and our pens, these very words for comfort and release. The path, it seems, cannot be trod by others. The only way ahead is step by step alone, a little in time. So that was my experience at that time. It was 2012, so it's now 14 years ago. I think things have improved a little bit. And this next poem, to some extent, in certain parts of the world, shows how that might change. Because this one is called A Good Death or Freedom Day. And it's written on Freedom Day, which was the day that my mother took her life, as it happens, ironically. I observe your death day while clearing out my house and life. I was moving house, dining with dear friends, lighting flames, walking the beach, writing wild. Marie Kondo fails to mention that decluttering fucks you up, a bit like Philip Larkin's parents. Watch out, it's not just stuff. Stuff harbors our depths, holds memory that burns at our minds and hearts, recalls those aching hurts. So take it like your medicine, as prescribed. Do not overdose. Please leave some gaps. Clearing out can be morose. This is especially the case if you're heading for the door that exits life well on in the race to where we'll bluntly be no more. And so pops up dear Nora. McKinney is her tricky name. I really do adore her podcast, for which her husband's death's to blame. Brain cancer took him very young, and she saw folks simply could not handle her great loss, leave alone discuss it. They would not. And then, she's good on this, her TED Talk's worth a listen, they decided time would heal her, which made her really pissed. The upshot is her podcast, Terrible, Thanks for Asking. Truly a fresh Midwestern blast of healing air and charming. But back to that night. My usual podcast up to date, Nora's clicks into second place, and I wonder if I've read it right. The screen says, a good death. And I grimace at my higher power, a sense of humor rather black to send me that right now. But I cook on anywho, listening to a startling story prefaced by a quote from Guru Atul Be Immortal, Gawande. At that, I am of course sucked in. For books on dying, he's right up there with Frankl, Kubler-Ross and Didion. His premise, we have no idea. Death talk, what he calls being mortal, is something we are seldom taught at school or by anyone at all, which makes our endings deeply fraught. And of course, it would be today, the day my mother took her life, that this podcast comes my way, chiming in at morning time. Perhaps that's the message, because in Maine, who knew, dignity and death, the chosen passage to beyond, is legitimately up to you. You decide when you depart and how. As long as you are terminal, grim word, you can bypass medicine's mad vow to keep the sick alive, which is so absurd. So we hear of how a father who has ALS wasting him away tells his children he would rather move on up, curtail his earthly stay. Once the diagnosis is approved, a prescription comes with certain rules, what to take and how and who can watch you pass along the way you choose. Perhaps believers balk at this. God, whoever they may be, will say when it's your time, it's high hubris if you think you can set the day. It seems so civilized, so utterly, completely human to make a call about your life become a painful burden. If Mum and those in her position could have had their say about their ailing health, talked frankly to a wise physician, and done away with upping drugs by stealth, or turning off the life support as planned by families and friends calmly in the know, if all this has been done beforehand, why shouldn't we just let them go? These vital, candid conversations, Nora's calling, may God bless her, are what is sorely missing from our lives. Talks that keep us from the knives and guns and pills and cars and ropes and give us what we're all so clearly missing, hope. So you'll be pleased to know that the next two are a little lighter. And the next theme is just two short poems about food. I am a self-confessed foodie. My name is Giles and I am a foodaholic. And so we also run an edible memoirs course at the Life Writing Collective, which is focused specifically on the way that food and particularly taste and smell, the senses of taste and smell can trigger memory, a la Proust, a la all sorts of things. So these are just two little short poems about that theme. The first one, I think, has been published by the Red Wheelbarrow. It might be on the website already. It's called Sticky Toffee Pudding, and it is often the one that we publicize edible memoirs with. And in fact, there is a course next Saturday, should people be interested. So Sticky Toffee Pudding. Mother's recipe, handwritten decades ago. Special occasions, last suppers before leavings. The ingredients, steeped deep in fat and sugar. White bread soaked in milk, simmered in golden syrup. Heart butter healing, furthered by stirring. Served with thick whipped cream, soothing memories. And that was actually a recipe of my mother's, as I say. This next one is a little bit more arcane, a bit obscure. It's called Far Breton. And I'm not, yeah, I think it probably does explain itself. It's a French pastry, very short, goes like this. Glorious pastry of prunes soaked in Armagnac, better than it sounds. Brittany's icon, buoyed by seafood, standing stones, and stark scenery. Youthful memories, back jobs, summer holidays, steeped deep in my soul. The next theme is nature. One of the reasons that I love living in the Cape is the natural world, the amazing natural world we have around us. But in fact, these pieces are mostly about the UK, which is where I come from originally. And this first one is called The Water Garden. And you'll see that this also has elements of memory in it as well. The Water Garden, Adam and Eve's paradise, just a bit wetter. The Forest of Dean, ancient woodlands bordering England and Wales. Childhood holidays, views of the River Severn from high terraces. On the bottom lawn, badminton competitions, long English summers. Ratatouille days, freshly dug vegetables, earth to casserole. Godmothers gathered, old school friends, Joe and Biddy, maidens trench, Yardley. Family history, sadly taken from us by shock, stroke, and cancer. But before that came the annual holidays, skirting the borders. Ancient waterways, Simmons' yacht, the River Wye, Tinton's green idyll. And this ancient place, monastic, contemplative, down a lime-treed drive. The name Prior's Mean, going back centuries to priests renting from kings. But as we knew it, magical family home, sprawling adventure, sylvan privilege, nature, abundance, hedgerows, blackberries, ragwort. Paid 10 pence a pull, yellow daisy, poisonous to horses and cows. The water garden itself, towering bamboo, leaf-hushed, insects, paths of mud. Dragonflies and frogs, springs and scary ponds, a boat to navigate them. For landlocked children, this waterland was daunting, disturbing even. For many others, it has been a green retreat, a place to breathe deep. Writers hide away. Novelists got creative in this lush setting. Once a movie set, Deborah Carr's Assam Garden, homage to India. By that time, house sold, cottage ruin converted to woodland idyll. Godmother Joe there, woodman Tim by her side, and border terriers. Also a deerhound, named after my mother, though I forget quite why. Tall, leggy, gentle, elegance, insouciance, perhaps those are clues. So many memories, a lost childhood's worth, now fading away, but captured right here, held tight by these syllables and grown back to life. Now, having said that there weren't local poems, in fact, this next one is very local. It's called The Secret Garden of Extinction, and its other title is Existential Threat. It's a list poem. Confetti bush, Cape rose, carpet pea, flats purple gorse, tree pelargonium, blowblom sali, cotobos, silver tree, heath filica, bulbil bugle lily, thradbla, Vrouwenborsie, wilde dache, or lion's ear, sour fig, brainsali, blowboth, rose-scented pelargonium, gold carpet, Cape thatching reed, cobweb bush, all threatened by us, by humankind, but preserved, celebrated right here in this place, this green belt breathing space, a secret garden of extinction, which does indeed exist in the Constantia Greenbelt. This last one in this section around nature did win an on-the-spot award at McGregor. I was very proud to receive that. So some of you will have heard this before, and this is Flight Path. A frantic flapping as I ran by, watching my feet, avoiding the shit dog owners leave in this our shared strip of semi-wildness between grey suburbia and the wetlands, between tamed nature and the real thing. And there you were, entangled in the strands of an electric fence, thankfully disarmed, majestic, dark-eyed, razor-beaked, one wing wedged up between the strands. You not knowing what had trapped you, me not understanding how you got there. The two of us ensnared by fear of each other, suddenly face to face with a species we had little business with, but also had no need to be afraid of. So I stopped, inhaled your magnificence, your taloned feet, your red dark plumage, but also your white barred black wing twisted up, pondering how I might release you. This not being a skill they teach at school or college, even though dear friends are avid birders, this circumstance had not been discussed, nor notes taken for future reference. So I simply said, "It's okay. Stay calm. Let the wing slide down. Don't struggle. You will hurt yourself. Gently does it." Or words to that effect to calm myself as much as you. You stopped. The wing, held in the upper strand, slowly glided down, and you gathered yourself. Then you looked at me as if to say, of course I wasn't panicking, you just startled me, and I just got a fright when you came running, which I had been doing from a long way off, and surely birds of prey are, well, eagle-eyed, but I did not correct you, it was not my place. We contemplated each other, as strangers sometimes do, looked each other obliquely in the eye, considered whether this encounter might continue or was over. All in all, for Africa, it was very British, frosty, formal, aloof. Then you dipped your rufous head, spread your wings, now released but not quite yet retested, and took off to my right around the houses, slowly, in no great hurry, to part from our strange meeting. Further down the path, which I then followed, you stopped, perched up on a bank, gathering yourself again, hoping, I suppose, that full flight would still be possible. And so it was, because as I jogged up beside you, off you soared, circled, glided across rooftops, and out of sight, encounter over. And as I ran on past the Flayside houses with their mountain views, my heart crash-landed meaning, power and freedom, a moment trapped in ignorance, requiring only calm and self-belief to solve the shock, tackle the new, inspired to find release and strength to soar again, to summit rooftops, find new flight paths, ways to live. Okay, so I'm conscious we're at 1:15. These next two are about relationship. One is quite long, and the last one is quite short. So if it's okay to carry on, these are the last two. So again, some of you may have heard this one. This is a prelude also to a course by the LRC. It's blatant advertising, I will say that up front, but it will become clear why that is the case. It's called When Tinder Banned Me, which is a true story. When Tinder banned me for no apparent reason, because you know they aren't obliged to tell you how you erred by using inflammatory curses or not responding to your likes within a politely determined period that I had no conception of, and because all my likes were blurred, you know, and apparently you have to pay to look your lovely likes clearly in the face. And statistics show, I have come to know, that only 3% of people deign to contact others without first pondering their visage, which of course computes completely in this swipe left world where so many are dismissed before we hear a word of what they might have to say or how amusing they might be. So as I say, when Tinder banned me, for reasons still opaque and quite unknown, for there seems not to be any appeal in appealing to their unbetter judgment for my banning, except, of course, that I was not yet prepared to pay them for the dubious pleasure of their service, which they only rendered for about a week, so that my desperately earnest seeking for a meeting with a like-minded person might somehow be techno-assisted by their hugely successful platform. When Tinder thwarted that intention, and worse, besmirched my reputation without so much as just one word of explanation, I decided that they could go fuck themselves. And instead, I shaved my beard and head, stopped eating sugar and stewed bread, made absolutely sure I did 10,000 steps, no less, every day without fail, shine or mostly rain, or swam 40 lengths of the pool at gym to create against the pull of age a hymn that other hymns might not swipe right on, and went to yoga to build my core and shore myself against the losing battle of fighting off age's increasing wobble, particularly around the middle regions. Let's not even talk about the nether ones, whose atrophy is more than imminent if I do not do something really permanent about this loneliness condition, which I rather like. Well, most of the time, because reading by the fire alone is sublime, relaxation of an invaluable kind that warms the soul and opens the mind in ways that others really cannot manage without doing irreparable damage to your independence, which, hard won, can suddenly be thwarted by a bit of fun turning into something suddenly serious, when all you were doing is being curious about whether there were others out there who simply liked the same things as you. So when Tinder banned me, as I say, although Hinge had not yet done so, I suspected writing was also on their wall, or rather on my profile, which by then had been left untended, weeds growing on the limited matches it had made of me and my painfully crafted wording of my wants and needs and preferences, which again a couple of men said hey to. But you know, hey is really not a conversation. And actually, if you want to get even halfway to first base, you are going to have way more than a pretty face, is what you need to know here. And in fact, apart from being queer, which these platforms seem to struggle to discern the amount of women and heterosexual men who came up on my profile, well, really, what is going on with this sophisticated algorithm here? Clearly, it's not up to much discrimination, which of course in our fluid times is probably just the way it should be. But you know, when you have been around for quite a lot of decades, I've found that I do have quite a good idea of what attracts me, and I have a little less time for this fluidity than clearly Tinder thinks I should. So finally, because I could go on as grumpy old men are prone to do, I did just want to say that part of my new way of being in the world and getting me and my work out in it was to be right here tonight, up on this stage, punting not just me, but also now you're trapped, the LRC, which stands for Life Writing Collective. Yes, it is a mouthful, and the writing isn't only what you think, i.e. the words, but also how writing can set your life right, heal your feelings, soothe your world, and maybe even teach you how to date without getting banned by Tinder. before you even had a chance to find a mate. So watch this burgeoning space for news of courses and events we're working on, and keep an eye on www.livewriting.com, because we'd love to have you find your muse with us. And indeed, we do now have a Writing for Dating course. This is the last very short piece, again, quite pertinent, because we've had fires only last week in the area I live in, over in Fishhook. And it's simply called To the Rescue. And again, a little lighter and a little more hopeful. Nights of fire and air, bright yellow birds of rescue follow fire trucks' call. Lakeside mountain blaze, careless human likely cause, chars my daily climb. Wind whips deathly fast, scales and spreads in short dark minutes, then flay brings rescue. 3 loud yellow storks dip scoop their wet red balloons and bomb the mountainside. Smoke turns into steam, black appears from grey and green, sad dark fire scar swathe. And then they are gone. Chaos contained in an hour, mission accomplished. Amongst it all, relief, tears of grateful wonder that some things here still work, even if much else fails. The helicopters still come and the trains still run. And there we have it.
Bravo. Let's unmute and clap, please, everybody. What an adventure. What a ride that was.
Thank
Oh,
you.
amazing. Thank you.
Pleasure, pleasure.
All right. Does anybody have a question after that? You can raise your hand on Zoom or type it in the chat if you're shy, or unmute yourself. John, you can start us off. Just unmute yourself, John.
No, it's not a question. It's not a question. I just want to say, Giles, what a wonderful collection. Thank you very much. Your first poem, I can't remember the title. It was a nice, neat title, but I found it as a non-gay person, I found it really moving. It said such a lot from the heart and from the intellect together, which is how the best poems come, I think. So I just want to thank you for that and for all your writing, for your work. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, John. Anybody else who wants to say something?
Heidi's waving, I think.
Yes,
Hello, Heidi.
I am.
Thank you for being here.
Sorry, I'm not using the reactions. I also wanted to say, well, a couple of things. I think Giles really beautifully read. You read with such precision is the word I want to use. So clearly and so movingly, actually. So thank you. It was lovely to see in all your poems, just you know, grappling with these really big, difficult issues, but with that really distinctive Giles sense of humor through all of them, through very difficult themes and topics. So that was really beautiful. It was lovely hearing the poems about grid, because I also have my early career in HIV. So yeah, it really took me back to some of those early years and some of the issues there. And I wanted just a question. There's a question about writing poetry and how that happens for you. I know you've had a very regular haiku practice. How does the long form happen? Kind of, is there a practice around that, a routine around that? Do they come as the issues come and you have to process, or just wanted to hear about that?
Yeah, no, good question. Good question. Because I think haiku is as I think you're implying, a very contained, even constrained form, and you kind of got to fit it into your 5, 7, 5 syllables and so on. The bigger poems, the gone viral, and in fact one I may read in the second half if there's time, sometimes just comes. I don't know that there is a conscious kind of sense that it's going to be a longer poem. It is a long, like the When Tinder Bad Me was written in one setting, sitting, it just came, boom. And you can hear that in a sense is a little bit more spoken word anyway. It's a more of a conversation. So it depends a lot on what triggers it, but generally speaking, it just comes by itself, and hence the unsuspecting, I'm a surprised poet, because I didn't think I'm a copywriter by training, and my life is writing prose, but suddenly this form comes from somewhere. I'm not sure it's a very conscious thing. I'm not sure it is. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thank you, Heidi. Okay, Jacques, you're up next.
So I really loved your reading, Giles. I mean, I've laughed at the end about the Twitter ban. That really caught me. Just unawares, the just laugh out loud, the ridiculousness and frustration of it all.
Exactly.
My question is also about how you find your way into the poems, and I'm thinking particularly of Going Viral and of the one about the Twitter ban, because they're different poems. And with Going Viral, I felt you were inviting us in, and at the same time there was a sense of a border, like you keep saying, but this isn't what you expect. It's not what you keep sort of saying, well, you're actually not in your own, to the reader or most readers, you're not in your own house. You're not standing in my shoes. And the one about the Twitter ban is different. You're sort of pulling us in more, maybe. It's lovely in both cases. And I wondered, how do you write them? Because you're making quite a complex argument in both cases. Do you just start writing in the middle and then write around that, or is there a particular image, a particular moment that you start with? Because they're like wonderful stories, really. But there's a center that really holds there. I don't know if that makes. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think I know what you're asking. I mean, they're two quite different poems in the sense of, well, obviously the Tinder one, it's actually Tinder, is jokey. I mean, it did happen. It is true, I promise. And it was very frustrating at the time. But I wanted to make fun of it to some degree, because I think they are necessary evils, these platforms.
Yes.
And so that one really did it just came, and you can hear the repetition and so on and so forth. I really didn't think very much about it. I don't think that was edited very much at all. Whereas Gone Viral, obviously, you can probably tell, has been quite heavily edited and is a very long poem. It's like 30,000 words. It's a very long form poem, because it talks about my entire kind of experience of HRV, both personally and professionally. And I think what you said, interestingly, about this kind of distance thing, I was challenged by Dawn, in fact, who helped me edit it, to make it more personal, because and of course it is personal. And then later in the poem, there are particular losses of particular friends where it is very personal. And the beginning of it is less so. It is kind of it's a framing. So you really need to see the whole poem to get a full sense of what the impact of HRV on my life specifically is, but also, of course, on the whole gay community's life as well. So that was a much more studied piece, and it was worked on over many years, and it does exist as a long form poem, as I say. Whereas the Tinder one is it. That was just one piece, as it were. So I think they were slightly different in terms of the approach. one much more crafted than the other, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I love the balance, the sort of between self-deprecation. There's a lot of that, and the confidence that's clearly also there.
Yes,
It's a very fine balance. I really like it.
Thank you. I guess self-deprecation is a bit of a British thing, isn't it, really?
Might be, but we do it too.
myself.
Yeah.
But thank you for the question.
All right, is there anyone else who wants to say something or ask something? Ed.
Hey, Giles. I really enjoyed hearing all of those in one stretch. I don't have a question, but I think the cumulative effect of the longer poems is really powerful. You're a great storyteller, and a lot of elements there that, yeah, whether they were written in one, more or less spontaneous take or very edited. And the humor is great as well. I really appreciate the humor, also with the often grim subject matter. So just appreciation, and I hope you put together a collection of your work at some point.
Yeah, I'm being beaten about the head by Dawn about it. Don't worry. Thank you, but thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Ed. Anybody else with a question or comment?
They've all gone silent.
Everybody's quiet. I also just want to say that I really love the viral poem and the one about death, euthanasia, I want to say, but that wasn't its title, of course. And then your Tinder poem is brilliant as well. So yeah, it's amazing how versatile your voice is and the subject matter you can talk about, but each one is still very much your voice. And I wonder, is finding the kernel of your own voice, is that something that's just come from, I mean, you write, you say, for your career as well, so you will have probably developed a voice in that sense in some way. Do you feel that comes into your own creative writing, or is it something you've worked at? Anything to say on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think a lot of my work has been social activism. So I have worked in NGOs in HIV prevention, but I've also worked in commercial copywriting. But quite a lot of the work that I've done has been around what's called social marketing. In other words, it's issue-based marketing rather than product-based marketing. So I do think I probably do have a bit of an activist voice, and that probably comes out in some of those poems, certainly the queer stuff and certainly the HIV stuff. I would imagine it definitely does. So I think that's part of my voice, but I would like to think that there's a kind of emotion and a compassion in it as well, even if it's self-deprecating at times. So I guess that's where I'm trying, and also the humor is important to me. I do think humor is really important in terms of leavening some of these more serious issues, as some of you have pointed out. Thank you, because I do think, you know, sometimes we do have to kind of break the somberness a little bit. So that's what I'm aiming for. And what the final mix will be, I don't know. I mean, these are some of the collection, but there are others too. So it'll be, yeah, interesting to see what comes out in the final wash, as it were. So I hope one day there will be a collection indeed. And thank you again for hosting me.
Thank you. Do you want to plug anything? I've popped the Life Writing Collective's website in the chat. I'm already now curious about the memoir food writing thing next weekend, so people must check that out. I might be there after all.
Please, yeah, look, it's a one-day edible memoirs course. What the key to edible memoirs is that there is food involved, not surprisingly. And the broad structure, if I may be punt for a moment, is that if we ask you to bring a food memory with you, and we ask you to bring an actual meal or pre-prepared recipe with you, so that we can share the food as well as the memory. And we're doing it at the Muizenberg kitchen if there are enough people, which is a community kitchen in Muizenberg. And so there are facilities to warm food up if need be, but the idea is that we bring the food, we share the food over lunch, but we also work through the particular ways that senses of taste and smell, which are very closely linked, evoke memory. So that's the particular theme if people are interested. We have got a poetry course in Joburg. I know most people here will be based in Cape Town. You may know people in Joburg. On May the 11th, which is Saturday. It's again a one-day course. It's going to be at the, and I will get this wrong, the Shamolagong Center at the Wits, which is I think near the center of Joburg, near Braamfontein. There is interestingly a new one called Writing for Mother, or I think it might be Writing the Mother, which has just been created around just before Mother's Day. And of course, we all have mothers, and we all have interesting, sometimes perhaps tricky relationships with our mothers. And so it's an opportunity to write through that particular relationship. And Dawn's running that on the 27th and 28th of April, the end of this month. And I think that's it that I can remember. Oh, there's a short 3-hour online course on writing the block, which we've run a number of times. Of course, writer's block, we all perhaps have experienced. That I'm running, I think, on May the 4th, but that's just a 3-hour online course. But it's all on the website, as per the poem, www.lifewriting.com. And of course, people are always welcome. There are discounts available if the cost is an issue. And so, you know, everything, as in most of life, is negotiable. Thank you. Thank you for the platform.
Thank you. On that note, last round of applause, and we'll take a 5-minute break.